Everyone, this is a public meeting, so we will be recording this meeting. And as usual, if you can, please use the raise hand function and verbally give your questions or comments so that we're able to capture everything on record as part of the discussion. It is a public meeting, so there may be members of the public in attendance. However, as per usual, I'll be addressing the Grant Advisory Committee, and we do have some time set aside towards the end for public comment. So if you are a member of the public, please hold your comments until then, and then raise your hand, and we would be happy to hear them. To keep everything consistent and on track, GAC members, if you have questions about a specific application or a specific, today what we're going to be doing is looking at the instructions from the commission, the CJC commission, and our next steps. And so today we're actually going to be going through our presentation, and then we'll have set discussion periods. We do have a short meeting today, and just to make sure that we get the most out of it, I would ask that you hold your comments and questions until those designated meeting times so we can get through all the information we need to, and then, hopefully still have a robust discussion during those time periods. So if you do have questions or comments while I'm talking before the discussion periods, please, hold them for the discussion periods. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So here is our meeting schedule for today. First, we're going to do our welcome and roll call. Then we're going to look at the CJC Commission instructions for the GAC review. And I apologize if I wrote GRC places. I'm in the middle of doing a GRC review with a different grant program. So I think those two are just getting completely scrambled in my mind. So I apologize. It should say GAC. So there are instructions for the GAC review of the applications. We're going to look at what staff have kind of put together as an approach for that, and then have a discussion in case you folks have different ideas, and just to make sure we're all on the same page and have a clear understanding moving forward. Then we'll have our public comment period and talk about next steps. So with that, let's go ahead. Well, excuse me, I'm also sick today, so I'm not at 100. I'm so sorry. So with that, let's go ahead and do roll call. Avery, if you don't mind doing roll call, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you.
Tristan Edwards.
Here.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
Here.
Shannon Wilson.
Here.
Harry Naughton, I believe, is not able to attend. Simon Fulford.
Here.
Brandon Brown.
Here.
Elaine Walters.
Here.
Jimena Ospina Todd.
Here.
And then Michael Kaiser. I believe he'll be joining and maybe a little bit late, but with that, we have quorum, Rima.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So first, we're going to talk about what the commission instructions were for the GAC review of the 2025-27 applications. So as per the rules for this program, the commissioners have the option to return the awards to the Grant Advisory Committee for further review. That's what they chose to do. With that decision, they instructed staff and the Grant Advisory Committee to start fresh, and that means to analyze all applications submitted under the solicitation again. And I do want to just say with that particular instruction, what they want is for us to specifically set aside the previous review and look at all of the applications again. So that includes applications that were deemed to be ineligible. We have to take them all into consideration again. what they also instructed us to do is to conduct a consistent and equitable review process that aligns with the program rules, priorities, and criteria set by the solicitation, and also incorporates you folks' feedback in a systematic and meaningful way. I want to say for that instruction, this also means that we need to set aside any information not included in the current solicitation and the applications that we have in front of us. So again, we can't ask for additional information. If there's anything outside of what we have available that you folks want to review, we would have to ask the commission to actually cancel this solicitation and start fresh. So we're limited to the information and criteria that were already set forth in the solicitation. And then the last instruction was really to focus on, or to include in our review, some of that additional criteria that was mentioned in the solicitation, and that specifically, specifically the additional criteria that highlighted were number of clients referred, number of clients served, percentage of clients that completed the program, cost per client. And then they talked about looking at or balancing out the number of clients for the less severe and more severe crimes, and how we interpreted that was average cost per client hour. So that's what the discussion during that commission meeting was, and based on further clarification that we got from the commissioners, that is information that we can use to kind of get to that review that they're looking for. So I just included this so we can kind of wipe our slate clean and look again at what we have in front of us. We have $4 million to award. Eligible applicants are public or private entities. It can be either in an established or implementation program. And then there are specific program requirements, such as it must be a community-based alternative to the criminal justice legal system, and it must be a front-end program. We have grant eligibility requirements and preferences that we must evaluate for each application. So according to the rules and statutes, we are required, or to be funded, an applicant must demonstrate those eligibility requirements, those 6 on the left-hand side of this slide, to be eligible for funding. So they must demonstrate those. The preferences, on the other hand, are things that you folks as the grant advisory committee can choose to give preference to either one or more of that list on the right-hand side. So they must demonstrate the things on the left-hand side. You folks as a group can collectively decide to give preference to any of those 7 preferences, although they must be applied consistently. So we'll come back to those and what that might look like in how we do this review moving forward. So just a reminder, we had 13 applicants that submitted that final application. Our total amount of funding requested is about $4.5 million over what we have available to award. And there's a list of, all the applicants, the program type, and what they requested. So now we're just going to really quickly go through what staff think might be a good approaches, and then we'll open it up to discussion. So again, just to ensure that we apply these things consistently, every application gets the same review, and it's done the same for every single application. The staff recommendation would be to do a survey with you folks. So what that would be, and I'll show you some examples on the following slides, but what that would be is kind of taking the scoring rubric and simplifying it a little bit. So it's not quite as complicated as the one that staff used in the last review. And it really focuses on those eligibility requirements and preferences. Like I said, that would help, ensure a consistent process for scoring. Every grant advisory committee would then provide feedback on every application, and we would, compile that and then take a look at the results. And it would ensure that we used a systematic way to gather those recommendations. And we would also, through discussion, through the survey, and through subsequent meetings, kind of determine how then to use the results of that survey, that scoring that you folks would do, to apply specific award reduction strategies based on the rescoring and ranking of applications required by a competitive process. So I have, like I said, a sample of a draft here. It's not been finalized, but just kind of what we have been thinking of what might be a simpler and more straightforward way to take that information that we already have and relook at it based on what we are required to look at. So the first section would just go through the eligibility criteria that the applicant must meet. And, we would obviously do this through some type of survey tool. So some of these might be survey, but use survey logic. So you might not necessarily like, in this first question, you're looking at an application and determining if it meets that first criterion for being eligible for RJ funds. If you hit no, you wouldn't then have to rate it. It would have that logic built in to lead you down the pathway. So this kind of, like I said, is a draft that kind of shows all options. So please keep that in mind. But basically it would just, like I said, focus in on the eligibility criteria. Did the applicant meet that? Yes, no. Based on the rules, if you say no, you have to provide a reason why not. And then if you say yes, then you could then rate how well, which is, a lot of what came up in conversation in the last review meeting was this idea of just saying yes or no doesn't capture the full picture. We want to also be able to say how well the applicant really demonstrates this criterion. So we built in, a way for you to rate that on each criteria for each application. So that would be the first section. The second section would go into those preferences and have a similar setup to it. Although I do want to note here that because these are the preferences and we can choose to apply any or all of them, we could today determine which preferences you think are most important, and then we would only need to evaluate those preferences. We could take out the rest of them. But that's really based on what you folks think is appropriate to look at. So that would be the second section on those non-required preferences. The third section focuses on those criteria that the commission instructed us to review. So that's the, clients referred and served, cost per client, that stuff. And then asks you to rate on how well the applicant demonstrates the efficient use of state funds for those. Since we felt that was getting more at the information that they were looking for us to review. And then the final section would be, ranking and also providing feedback on how that scoring would then be applied to a reduction strategy. So, we gave some examples, but it really could be whatever ideas you folks came up with and agreed upon. We kind of, in the last process, ended up awarding only the higher ranking applicants. We could do something similar, but basically just gathering feedback from you guys on how to take that analysis that you guys would do on the applications and apply it to a systematic strategy to determine the funding. So we could collect that information through this survey as well. So, discussion. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a good direction to go in? Do you have other ideas? The floor is yours. And please use your raise hand again. So, Tristan?
Hi. Well, first of all, thanks for walking us through this. And I appreciate the way that the CJC is reconsidering this. One thing that I am concerned about is kind of this idea of having a systematic reduction strategy. I think one thing that we saw in the last round was that kind of applying kind of across the board percentages at least was not a way to get to the preferred result. And we have a situation where there are some applications, that are asking for really, really large grant awards in comparison to others. And so my memory from the last review is that the program that we ranked as the highest was still getting less money than some of the programs that had been ranked much lower because of the discrepancies in what was requested. And so I think that that needs to be taken into consideration. And I would be in favor of, after we've done our scoring and we see kind of where the preferences lie in terms of, how these programs stack up against one another, then just like taking a really discerning look at the individual budgets. We might decide that we want to, cut certain budgets a certain percentage, or that we want to kind of really examine those budgets and see what things are needed and what are not. I mean, I don't have a like perfect proposal on how to address this. I just want to make sure that programs that are asking for a huge amount of money are not given a preference simply by virtue of the fact that they asked for a lot of money.
So we could include something in the survey that has you rank the or score the budget section. That's completely, feasible to do. We do have to apply a consistent and systematic process that was our instructions. So that's what we need to do in this process. And we do need to tie the scoring that we do in with our funding determinations. Again, we can include something in the survey that speaks to that. You guys could also, choose to cap, certain requests or something like that that apply broadly to all applications, but we can't make determinations on one application based specifically on what they're requesting. It does need to be systematic and across the board. And it looks like Simon has a hand up.
Yeah. Again, thank you, Rima and CJC team for drafting a framework. I generally like the approach. It seems, we're aiming for consistency. So I like the kind of the yes, no criteria and then the ranking of, did they answer that strongly or not, 1 to 5. I think that's a good approach. I very much agree with Tristan's comment on these budget questions, and it's a little bit linked to the commissioner's request on that sort of. It's in a sense, it's another way of looking at the value for money, for lack of better terms. Therefore, if there has to be a consistent approach for all budgets, then something like a ranking of the budget request. Is this I don't know how you ask the question. Is it a cost-effective budget? Is it a legitimate budget for the intended outcomes? Which people could answer that differently in the sense that it doesn't just mean you have a X thousand and you're going to work with hundreds of cases. If if that quantifying of this is focused on very intensive cases, this is focused on kind of a more volume, blah blah blah.
Right.
I do wonder, I haven't got a firm opinion, but I do wonder if to make some of that process, quote, easier for all of us, and again, it might be a way of being equitable, is to just set some sort of maximum cap. I don't know. I'm just wondering if that might also help us. No answer to that question for the team.
Yeah, and we can, like I said, we can do both of those things. We can include a scoring or ranking for the budget section that is specifically for the budget section. I do agree with you, Simon, that I think some of those cost related criteria that the that the commission asked to review does get at some of that concern. But I think we can also set a cap to the amount requested by each applicant. Again, as long as it's across the board, and applied equitably to all, it's something we can discuss. Kathleen?
I guess one of the other things that we have to try to take into consideration, and we don't have the ability to ask applicants, is the fact that when we are taking any type of budget cut, that ultimately impacts a group's goals and objectives. And although there was an outline of, how might you do this, we never specifically asked everybody, if you do take this, what does that look like? So if we do put in a cap or we take across the board reductions, but we're evaluating everybody based upon their goals and objectives for their full request, we're not actually, it's a completely different scenario now. So yeah, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with how we effectively evaluate everyone if we are making recommendations to cut the budgets because we're basing it off of their true requests. And I think in most of the circumstances of the applications that we received, I think people were really thoughtful. They knew what they could try to achieve. And we have very little information. All we have in front of us is the application. We don't really know which each organization's financial circumstances are, where they stand with being able to offset some of those funds. So I guess that ends up being more of a comment than a suggestion. I'm still kind of trying to process how we might address that. So
Yeah, I think that is a difficult, it's just a difficult situation that all of our grants at this point in time face because of the limited funding. And we definitely have come up against that question. Again, we can ask them to do an additional scenario with the budget that they submitted that shows even deeper cuts. For example, we could ask them to resubmit their budget with like a 50% cut. So we could ask all applicants to do that. It would take additional time in the process. So we have to weigh the benefit with, just trying to get the process completed in an expedited manner. But we could do that. We can't ask for new information. We couldn't have them to fully revise their budget because that would be outside of the parameter of the current solicitation. So we kind of have to work with the information we have. And Simon, I saw your hand up as well.
Yeah, Kathleen, I appreciate your that question. And I feel like some ways I don't know how solvable that is. Where I do think what is fair is we don't know that there's significant impact on a project. They submit a budget for a plan at 100%. And if we turn around and say, well, you're getting 50%, that no matter what, that has a dramatic impact on what they think, what they would want to propose. But we as the GAC, I think we can still, I don't know how we could answer for that until they are told what they will or won't be getting. But I feel that we could make a fair and equitable sort of assessment of their project and the budget as they presented it, which is kind of looking at it in its best case scenario. The best case, funded 100%, this is what it would deliver. And therefore we're assessing, is that getting good outcomes? Is it a strong proposal? Is it, kind of quote the value for money, blah, blah, blah. And so I feel personally, I would be making my assessment on that. And it's then up to, if we then make a decision and we say that one's funded at 90% and this one's funded at 25%, whatever that is, it is that, as happened last time, it's then up to the CJC to have that conversation with the project program and say, hey, you've been awarded X. How does that change what you then can deliver on over the next 2 years? If it's doable at all, I don't know. Some might say 25% of my ask, I can't do anything, I'm pulling out. I don't know, but I feel like we can still make a pretty equitable assessment of the budget and the kind of project as presented. and it's still not an easy thing.
Yeah,
I
and
guess.
just to piggyback on what you said, Simon, so this is a normal part of the grant award process that we always go through. You know, folks, if they are funded at significantly less than they requested, they can choose not to accept the money or to change their program. If it's too much of a change, we would include that um in our, you know, information that we provide to the commission. If it's a significant change to their program, and then the commission does actually need to approve it if it is a large enough change. But it is a normal part of our process that we just have to unfortunately do, because we are not always awarding folks what they would like to be awarded. And Elaine, it looks like your hand is up.
Thank you. I really appreciate just the systematic way of doing this. I think us having a sort of an agreement about doing the survey for each of them will help. And I'm looking back on page 7 where you were talking about the requirements versus the preferences. And one of the things that I feel like would be an enhancement to the conversation is that number 6, an ability to work collaboratively with system partners. And I'm not sure that I felt like we ever really got to do a deeper dive into where everybody was at around that capacity. And an ability isn't a plan, or we hope we're going to, but that we were all over the map, I felt like, with that. And so if ability means that they have evidence that they can and are, either in the form of working agreements or a history, that feels very different than sort of saying, we will do this, we will do that, we will do that. So that will help me, just that ability to kind of do that consistently across the applications. With regard to the budget, I just want to understand, I heard Simon say we could do, if you offered somebody 60% and somebody else 25%, are we allowed to do that? Are we allowed to sort of have opinions about one organization taking a bigger cut than another without doing something like a cap?
If those recommendations are applied systematically, like we did previously, we ranked them and applied percentage cuts based on the scoring or the ranking. That is definitely within your purview to do. We wouldn't necessarily be able to do it, willy-nilly for each application.
It would never be willy-nilly, ever. We're not willing. No, I'm just playing with you. Okay, so that makes sense. So again, we have to kind of come to an agreement about what those scorings end up looking like based on all of our input. And then will that be set? So let's say everybody does their survey, and it gives you this ranking, but upon consideration in our group discussion, one moves up and one moves down, or is it just set once we all survey and vote?
Great question. So part of the survey is to gather that information on the ranking, and also, the scores themselves, the ranking, and also those recommended or suggested, award or reduction strategies. So we would definitely need to come back together at that point and discuss what those findings were across the board. What you guys all look like collectively when we put all the surveys together, and then make some decisions based on that. I think part of the confusion and part of the pushback we got, at least from, my interpretation of what the commission said and what the feedback we got is moving people around after the scoring was not seen as adhering to the scoring. And so I think we want to avoid doing that if possible. We want to just take what we receive from everyone and stick to what the collective ranking and scoring are, and then determine from there how to apply that scoring to an award or budget reduction strategy.
So then I have one more question.
Sure.
What I felt like we had before was the staff ranking. And then that's what we ended up moving around within because the GAC didn't agree with the ranking.
Staff is not doing this ranking. This will be purely you guys.
Okay, that was my question is how do we, okay, so I can imagine a scenario that would be similar where one of the, um, it could be similar. Somebody could rank somebody really high and somebody else could rank somebody really low, the same proposal. And is that something that just sits and makes an average score then? Okay.
We would calculate it based on how we calculate surveys. Yes.
Okay, so just straight math. And then I did notice that you wanted scoring from everybody on every application. Do we have the exception of where there's a conflict of interest where
Yes,
we
so-
don't okay.
Yeah, if at the top of the form, once we build it, the idea is to have a little checkbox or something that you indicate if you have a conflict, and then you won't have to complete the rest of the scoring. But we just want to make sure that we get as many scores from as many folks as possible for every application, so they're receiving the same consideration.
Okay. Thank
So you're welcome. So it sounds like people are on board for doing a survey, which is great. And you know, unless anyone speaks up differently, we'll assume that that's the consensus and move forward with that plan. So given that, as I mentioned before, you know, the stuff on the left of this slide, we have to determine for every single applicant. That is the required stuff. The stuff on the right, the preferences, you guys can choose to give preference to one or all of these things. So you guys could do a vote right now that says you really want to only focus on, I don't know, 6 and 7, or whatever ones you think are most important. And we could even take them out of the survey so you're only focusing on those things, or apply additional weight to the questions. Either one of those is an option. But I think we should determine that now before we do the survey. So once, you know, we're compiling the results, it's already built in. We don't have to go back and try and figure it out after the fact. So if you folks have specific preferences that you think are more important or should be given more weight, I think now would be the time to discuss that and make a determination. And Tristan, it looks like your hand is up.
Hi, thank you. Just super quickly back on the survey, I just wanted to say that I do like the idea of ranking budgets.
Okay.
And if we wanted to set a cap, is that something that we would need to do now, or could we do that later?
We could do either one. I think so. We're gonna have to add a section to the survey. We can very easily include a question that asks like what an appropriate cap would be, and then discuss it at a future meeting. It really depends on it really depends on you folks. I would probably maybe do the ranking first, and then, you know, gather all the feedback about what reduction strategies would be appropriate, and then get into that piece. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that makes sense. And that plan sounds fine to me as well. In terms of the preferences, I know you've heard me say this before, but my issue with the preferences is not like the preferences themselves. It is how programs have been answering questions related to the preferences. So for example, number 7, let's take not disqualifying participants based on prior criminal history. I think that this answer is consistently just I get the sense that a lot of times it is interpreted in a variety of different ways, such
Yeah.
that pretty much every single program will say that they don't disqualify participants based on prior criminal history, even if a system partner that is doing the referral is doing some sort of disqualification. And so my issue is there, I mean, like, I guess this would be more for the grant, like just a call to the grant or advisory committee to like be very discerning, but I'm not inclined to take every application at their word of just yes, no, we do disqualify or we don't disqualify. I would want there to be just like, maybe if in the survey we were required to like say the specific reason why we thought they met the preference, or if there's just like some like good explanation, and also a ranking of like how much weight we give to that preference per application. The one that I lifted up in my, oh, sorry, go ahead.
We can, since these are preferences, we can choose that not to have that as a preference and not evaluate it in the survey. These are preferences, so they
Yeah.
may be given, right? So you could choose to include 1 through 6 and not give a score and therefore not give a weight to number 7. That might
Yeah.
address your issue, or we could add something where folks are asked to provide an explanation for their score. Either of those are fine.
Okay. Yeah, I think number 7 just bothers me because I feel like it is not accurately reflected in a lot of the applications. Like I like it as a preference, but I find that it has not been easy to, really understand what that looks like across the different programs. And yeah, I think that being able to give some sort of ranking, like number 1, offering services that engage rural or historically underserved regions, if we can rank on a scale from 1 to 5, how well that preference piece is met, resolve. They operate in a very rural area. Like I'd give them a higher score than, maybe a more metropolitan program that doesn't have a demonstrated track record of addressing, historically marginalized groups, even if they both say we meet this preference point.
So
Okay,
right now, in the draft survey, we have a scale of 0 to 5. So you could say 0, you don't think they meet it at all. Unlike the eligibility requirement, we didn't, because you have to state for those eligibility requirements why you don't think that they're met. We didn't include that here, but we could if you folks thought it was appropriate. Or like I said, so I think the options are not included at all because you decide it's not a preference that you want to apply during the solicitation process. Include it as is with the 0 to 5 ranking, or add so there's an explanation component once the score is entered. So I think those are 3 options for us to go forward with for those preferences. Now, Elaine, your hand was up. Oh, I think you're on mute still.
Are you saying that all we're going to get for the left hand is a yes or no?
No, they'll also have a ranking. So if you see,
okay.
We have to have each applicant meet every single one. And if they don't meet it, you have to provide an explanation of why. That's in the rules. So the way that it's scored is slightly different than for the preferences.
So not meeting the requirements would make a program ineligible, basically.
Yeah,
okay.
But you would have to state why.
Yeah. What's interesting about some of these is that some of them are very much yes or no, but some of them are it depends on who you talk to and how do we know it's true. Similar to what Tristan was saying about some of the other ones, especially number 6, I think is really more fluid than a yes or no. Because and how are we measuring their ability to work collaboratively with system partners? And I just again want to be thoughtful about what and because we have, understandably so, the limitation that we are only working with what has been included in their application, not what we may know about them.
Right.
Then getting as consistent as we can about how we're actually ranking. Is this a 1 through 5 ranking on the left also?
Yeah, so you have the option to say yes or no. Do they meet that criteria, and provide an explanation? And then if you feel they met it at even a base level, you can score them on a scale of 1 to 5 on how well the applicant demonstrates that criterion. So I think that captures a little bit of that concern, is you can say, yes, they technically met it. They say they met it, but I don't feel like they really demonstrated it well.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think maybe what would be helpful now is to go back to those preferences and maybe, you know, go through each one individually, and you folks can determine if you want to include it in this survey as a preference that you're giving preference for, or if you want to disclude it. And then that will, you know, that will round out what we're including in the survey, so we at least get our job for today done, if that makes sense. Okay, so I see some nodding. So
Rima, I just wanted to lift up really quickly, sorry, because
Oh, no
Elaine has
worries.
been mentioning this, the sixth criteria. There is an additional rule that speaks to this ability to work collaboratively with system partners. It looks, yeah, it says an ability to work collaboratively with system partners may be shown by demonstrating a willingness to communicate with or involve system partners in an applicant's program, and does not necessarily require involvement of system partners in the restorative justice program.
Yeah.
I just wanted to uplift that since we've been talking about it.
I think we actually did include that in the survey. We're trying to take the language directly from the rules. So hopefully it'll be all there in front of you when you're making those reviews. But thank you, Tristan. So let's go through these and just you know, indicate to me if it's a preference that you want to include. So the first one, offering services that engage or serve rural, historically underserved regions or areas in Oregon, is that one that folks want to give preference to and score in this process?
I think you know, not obviously someone who's in an urban environment can't meet that. So, but they've got different aspects. But I think if we had actually preferences 1 and 2, I think they kind of are speaking to those diverse needs across our states, because
Okay.
it's pretty diverse. So that's
that-
just me. I would keep 1 and 2.
Okay.
I will say 2 has really tripped me up, because we don't have really a definition of what culturally appropriate services is. That's one that I feel like gets checked by every program, and has kind of sent me down this spiral of, okay, well, what do we mean by culturally appropriate services then? And I wonder if one kind of encompasses enough of what we're trying to get at with number 2 that we could just focus on number 1. I don't know. What do you think about that, Simon?
I know what you're saying, and if the underserved is understood to be broader than just rurally underserved, then yes, I agree.
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't actually clock that it says regions or areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is anyone opposed to keeping 1 or 2 in, given that those latest comments? Elaine, your hand?
Well, I'm given some feedback that there's only a few of us that talk sometimes in these meetings. I do wonder if some of the folks that haven't spoken yet could speak to these 2. And I do wonder, I understand, Tristan, what you said, but I'm wondering if what we really mean is not culturally appropriate, because we'd all try to be culturally appropriate, but culturally specific services, meaning that communities are running their own, like tribal communities are running their own programs, for example, that's culturally specific. We're not measuring appropriateness, you're right. And I just wonder if other folks on this call might have some thoughts about this that haven't spoken up.
I do want to just remind everyone we're at 12:46, so we're getting closer and closer to the end of the meeting, and we do have some follow-up steps, so just keep that in mind. And we don't have to remove preferences. We can keep them all in for evaluation. It just is a very easy and straightforward way to highlight which preferences you folks actually want to apply, to only include those in the survey. Shannon?
Yeah, thanks. I know we only have 15 minutes. I don't have, thanks, Lane, for saying that, but I know we don't have a lot of time. So I actually wanted to comment on about the overall like reduction strategy for grants. Would it be possible to set an amount? I'm just curious because we're talking now. Would it be possible to set an amount across the board and then have like an increase strategy rather than a reduction strategy? I'm just curious. I don't know the
Yeah,
answer,
we
but
can. Yeah.
it seems like that's kind of where we wanted to go, was like be able to have more offer more feedback regarding like what the budget was actually, the budgets that were actually submitted. And so I'm wondering if there was a system, or if you've had experiences in other grant advisory committees where, yeah, there's just like a certain amount of points assigned or something that allow the grant advisory committee to create those like upward additional amounts from a base amount awarded.
Yeah, we can, and you could include that like as one of your preferred reduction strategies if in the survey, if that's you know, what you ultimately think is the best. For our marijuana grant, for example, the grant review committee wanted to award everyone. So they started with, you know, however deep a percentage cut they could make and have funds left over. And one of the strategies that we talked about, but we didn't ultimately go with, would be then taking whatever was remaining and applying it to the budgets of the highest scoring applicants. So something like that is something that could be done. Again, as long as we do it systematically and it's tied to the actual the scoring and review process. But that's absolutely something you could highlight as what you would like to see in that question about the budget reduction strategy that we're hopefully getting responses from everyone on.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So does anyone have any strong feelings about removing any of these or taking or keeping them all interest in?
I think Simon had his hand raised before me.
Oh, Simon, go ahead.
In the interest of time, I would advocate removing 3, 6, and 7.
Okay. Tristan?
Okay, well that actually fits pretty well with what I was going to suggest. I was going to suggest removing 3 and 6 simply because you know, we're asking people to slash their budgets, and so it seems like it would just be kind of giving a preference to folks who decided to cut in a different area. And yeah, so I think that's just really difficult. So I would advocate moving 3 and 6, and 7 has just been a problem, so I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Okay. Thank you. Are you done with your comment? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I am done.
Okay, Kathleen, your hand was up.
I'm open to reducing or eliminating number 3. I'm concerned about eliminating number 6, given the fact that kind of the priorities of why this funding exists, what we're doing to help individuals. That, to be honest, that one causes me a little concern to remove number 6.
Did you have any concern about removing number 7?
I hear Tristan's comments on number 7. I think reviewing the proposals, and if we have an ability to rate those scores, I think that we can manage number 7 appropriately.
Okay. Brandon, I think your hand was up.
Yes, I have no problem with 1 or 2. Wording might be a little off, but I feel like we could work through it. I feel we could remove number 3.
Okay.
I'm in agreement with Kathleen. I'm not with removing number 6. And number 7, I can go either way, honestly.
Okay, so it sounds like we have, at least from the folks that have spoken so far, a consensus on removing number 3 at least. Do we want to just go ahead and do that, or do we want to take a vote real quick for each of those and just see where we stand? Tristan?
So sorry to keep talking. I just want to ask a question for how we're interpreting number 6 in terms of prioritizing funding for direct services. Would we consider like personnel funding for restorative justice facilitator as prioritizing funding for direct services? I'm seeing Kathleen shaking her no. Yeah.
I'm seeing no's.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, my issue with that remains the same, but yeah, I'm down to vote on number 3 if that's, or yeah, number 3.
So it sounds like everyone's on board for number 3, but we can take a vote real fast. So let's, so the first vote is, or wait, it sounds like, sorry, let me roll back for a second. It sounds like everyone's on board for number 3. So let's take a vote on number 6, which is one of the ones that people are having some misgivings about. So if you want to take number 6 out of the priorities list, please vote yes. So I'm just going to go through, or Avery, do you mind going through?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, and doing roll call vote, and we'll see where we stand.
Okay, so removing number 6, Tristan Edwards.
I vote to remove it.
Okay.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
I vote to keep it.
Okay. Shannon Wilson.
And this is for 6.
Yeah,
Yes.
just for 6.
Yeah, I feel comfortable voting to remove that criteria or that preference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Simon Fulford.
I vote to remove.
Brandon Brown.
I vote to keep it.
Okay.
Elaine Walters.
Oh, I can't vote, just either way, so I pass.
Okay. Jimena Ospina Todd.
I vote to keep it.
Okay, and I don't believe Michael Kaiser has joined yet, so I think we're tied.
Yeah.
Is there any way you can vote, Elaine?
Oh, let's keep it.
Okay, so we have we have voted to keep that one. So let's go on to number 7 real fast and vote whether to remove it or to keep it.
Tristan
Avery.
Edwards.
Oh, sorry.
I vote to remove it.
Kathleen Meehan Coop.
I think I'm inclined to keep it.
Okay, Shannon Wilson.
Remove.
Simon Fulford.
Remove.
Brandon Brown.
Like I said, I was one that can go either way, but if I have to vote, I can say we could remove it.
Elaine Walters.
Removing it's fine with me.
And then Jimena Ospina Todd.
I'm okay with removing it from the preferences.
Okay, cool. So that one we can remove, Rima.
Excellent. So you'll only have 6 out of the 7 to evaluate.
No,
Or
5.
sorry, 5 out of the 7. Thank you. So 3 and 7 will be taken out, and you'll be looking at 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6. So thank you very much for doing that. So again, we have very little time left. So if you guys don't mind, I'm just going to jump to our public comment period, and then we can talk about next steps, which includes scheduling more meetings. So let's go ahead and move to public comment. So if you're a member of the public and you'd like to make a comment, please raise your hand, and we can give you some time. So it looks like we have one hand raised, at least Miles.
Yeah, so I had a question about the changes to the focus on clients referred, clients served, and cases completed. How will you look at that in terms of implementation programs that don't have that data?
So we're not allowed to answer questions, so we'll have to follow up
Oh.
with you separately, unfortunately. It's just for purely for
Oh,
comments, and I apologize.
Okay.
But please, shoot me an email, or I can try and remember to follow up with you on that question. So I think Andrea.
Hello.
Present.
I recall the commissioners made a comment about considering the level of harm that was involved, and noting that they recognize that the higher level of harm would take more time, which would cost more money, and you'd end up with less number of clients served. And I don't believe that I saw that in the survey taken into account. That's all.
Thank you for your comment. Any other public comments at this time? All right, I don't see any other hands raised, so thank you folks for participating in public comment. We're going to go ahead and move on. Again, if you have specific questions or anything, feel free to reach out to staff at any time. So we'll make those changes to the survey and try and roll that out as soon as possible by the end of this week at the latest. Our estimate for how long that would take you folks to complete, given how quickly we're trying to get these, decisions back in front of the commission again to get these awards made, is 2 weeks at most. So what we were hoping to do is schedule a meeting either November 13th and 14th or the following week, the 17th through the 21st, of maybe 3 hours, and then doing a second meeting just to make sure we're all, so we'll look at the results from the survey at that point and talk about those reduction strategies, and then do a second meeting to really get into those reduction strategies to make sure we're all on the same page. And just given the time frames for everything, we think that meeting would need to be the first week of December. So does that sound feasible to you folks? Do you think you can get the surveys back in 2 weeks? And if so, we can try and schedule those meetings right now so they're on everyone's calendars.
Will be in a 2-week trial starting on November 10th.
Okay.
So I mean, if we can, the week before would work for me, the week of November 3rd.
So that would mean a shorter survey period for folks. That would be only like a week or so. And I'm seeing thumbs up. If people are okay with doing a shorter turnaround, we can try and move it up.
I feel like we need to do a shorter turnaround just because of the situation we're in anyway, that we know people are sort of hanging on, waiting for some continuation of funding. And so it feels appropriate to me to move it thoughtfully, but quickly along.
Okay.
I support a faster process. I also have a 1 o'clock meeting that people are starting to come into my office on.
Okay. So could we do November 7th, or is that still too late?
The November 7th is a Friday.
Mm-hmm.
So is that what people are proposing? Yeah, that works for me. There's a lot of time in there for me. I have a meeting at 2 o'clock, 2 to 3 o'clock, 2 to 3:30. So, but any of the rest of the day would work for me on that day.
Okay.
I can do November 7th.
Okay.
I can do the 7th as well, but a quick clarifying question. If we get things done on November 7th, when would we think our follow-up meeting would be?
So we could move it forward.
Karen, do you mind grabbing me?
By about, I mean, it gets tricky because Thanksgiving is before that, and we would still need time to prep. So
I mean, if we're going to be in a situation where, because of the holiday and things, we're not going to, I mean, I am 100% on board with getting this done as quickly as possible.
yeah.
And to be honest, I would, if there was a way for us to get it done in October, I'd be all for that. That being said, if we're going to still be in a situation where our second meeting isn't going to happen until, December, is there any value in rushing it? I mean, I think there's a lot of value from the programs for us to rush this. I guess just looking at the schedule, sorry.
Yeah, so at this point, I think we're because of our schedule internally and how long we have to prep for the commission meetings, we can't get on the October commission meeting. So November is the earliest. We could try and squeeze in 2 meetings, before the November meeting, which is that's this month. The 18th of November, but it's still cutting it pretty close because we have to give them like 2 weeks to look over everything themselves.
If we get through most of the conversation, so it seems like there's a 2-step though. One of them is making sure that the survey kind of matches what we said and just having a peek at that ahead of time.
Yeah.
And then doing it. If we can make it a longer meeting on the 7th earlier in the day, then it seems like we can get a good bulk of our work done then, especially, around we can see the scores, we can come to some recommendations. And I don't know what that involves to get that to the 18th, the meeting on the 18th, but it seems possible if we have a long enough time on the 7th.
We can do a longer meeting on the 7th. Absolutely. I still think it's a pretty tight turnaround since they would need all that information basically on the 7th, and we have to do prep for ourselves internally. So and we have competition with other grant programs that are on in November already. So I'm thinking that December is probably the earliest we can get on, but absolutely if we can schedule this November 7th meeting for longer and get through more, and just try our best, then absolutely. So that sounds like a good date for folks. We'll try and schedule, we were going to try and do 2 3-hour meetings, schedule a 6-hour meeting if that's okay with folks. The last one where we had a long discussion was 5 hours and we definitely went over. So it would need to be a large block of time like that. So we can send out meeting invitations for that. And we'll send out the survey, as I said, by the end of this week. And try for that 1-week turnaround just to get everything moving as quickly as possible.
Gosh, I'm hoping it's not a 6-hour meeting now that we have sort of a structure that's very well established. So, and we've all read the applications multiple times, but earlier, let's just schedule it as early as we can and bound it with extra time and then finish when we can. But I have to jump off now, but
Okay.
Thank you all.
Yep, thank you. We'll send out the survey and the meeting invitation as soon as possible. Thank you. Thank you guys very much. Have a good rest of your day.